Why'd you break into the factory?
I knew you had the keys. You'd have to come and get me.
Why can't you just let it go and give us all some peace, for God's sake?
I know exactly why you killed.
I did not do it.
We're looking for the single bloke. 2, 1, 2. Cha-cha-cha.
If you need help following a rape or sexual assault and need someone to talk to, you can contact your local victim support scheme or phone 0171 735 9166 during office hours.
A girl's been abducted.
She'll die if we don't find her soon.
She's just 15 years old.
We have to help her.
She could be anywhere. We're short of time. We can't wait that long.
We're up against a deadline.
The driver's the abduction suspect.
Deadline, an hour-long special of The Bill next Wednesday at 8 on Central.
Change your mind about your new Rover, and you can simply return it to your Rover dealer, whatever the reason.
What did you say?
You are like the sea. You cradle the stars. You are the powerful sun that rushes to my head. You are the powerful sun that rushes to my head.
Poeme, the new fragrance by Lancôme.
The leading magazine for men, GQ, reviewed organics. Their verdict? For strong, healthy-looking hair from the roots, organics delivers.
You know Daz is good value, right? But did you know just how good? Especially when compared to some other leading brands. We asked people what they thought.
Top brand names, there's not much difference in price. Maybe a couple of pennies here and there. There probably isn't much difference.
So, what is the actual difference? It could be as much as the price of a loaf of bread.
30p? Oh, I didn't think it'd be as much as that.
Goodness, wow. I didn't expect it to be quite as much and buy me an extra loaf of bread.
So go on, check Daz yourself against other leading brands. For whiteness and value, use your loaf.
How does CoverGirl Helena Christensen magnify her lashes without clumps or globs? With new professional mascara. The new formula glides on with a special curved brush to magnify every lash without clumps or globs. For lashes that look natural, new professional mascara from the new look of CoverGirl.
Cellnet and Vodafone round up their calls to the nearest minute or half minute. On Orange, a 10-second call is charged as 10 seconds. Another reason why, on average, Orange users save £20 every month. The future's bright. The future's orange.
You're more nervous than your daughter.
What if my diarrhea comes back?
You took the Imodium, didn't you?
Yes, but just one dose.
Well,
for most people, one dose of Imodium is usually as effective as several doses of traditional remedies.
Dad, a simple toast will be enough.
No, love. Not for my daughter.
Imodium, designed to stop diarrhea with one dose.
By checking every used car, your Rover dealer removes all the worry from buying second-hand. Well, nearly all.
Sometimes the question is more important than the answer.
It is not nicked, all right. Were you hit, sir?
Yes.
When I wake up in the morning, the first thing I think about isn't tone anymore.
That is actually a very nice bottle of wine.
So come on in. How much?
It's nicked, isn't it?
I'm asking you to marry me.
Soldier, Soldier, Tuesday at 9 on Central.
Alone and scared, this child is a prostitute in the Filipino sex trade.
These children are out of sight, out of mind.
A trade Father Sheikh Allen has a mission to stop.
There's no price you can put on a human life or on the life of a child.
A fight for innocence, defender of the children, part of Children in Danger Week, Tuesday at 10:40 on Central.
Time now for the latest national and international news from ITN. You're watching Central.
ITN News at 10 with Trevor McDonald.
Rosemary West finally tells her story in court. Jacques Chirac rebukes Britain's Eurosceptics. Dramatic rescue after tornadoes crash in mid-air. And who's the VIP awaited by flight NZ1? Good evening. Rosemary West went into the witness box at Winchester Crown Court today to deny any knowledge even of most of the 10 young women she's accused of murdering. She said she hadn't been allowed into the cellar at Cromwell Street in Gloucester where 9 bodies were buried, and said she'd been frightened of her husband Fred. After a childhood in which she'd been raped twice and abandoned by her mother, she said he'd promised her the world and she'd fallen for his lies. ITN's Robert Hall reports from Winchester.
Even before Rosemary West's arrival at court, there had been intense speculation that she would take the stand. In a packed courtroom, the judge, Mr. Justice Mantell, asked Defence Counsel Richard Ferguson, "Will you be calling Rosemary West?" Answer, "I will, my lord." Mrs. West walked the short distance from the dock to the witness box with her head bowed. Mr. Ferguson had told the jury this would be an ordeal for her. The court was hushed as she asked to sit down and gave her name, Rosemary Pauline West. Then, in a soft, faltering voice, she began her evidence. She recalled incidents from her early life as a schoolgirl in Devon and her love for 2 younger brothers. Asked about her first sexual experience, Mrs. West told the court that she had been raped twice before she was 16. Soon after the second incident, she remembered meeting Fred West for the first time in a local bus station, adding, "He promised me the earth and I fell for his lies." Mrs. West went on to describe their life together in Gloucester's Midland Road and the disappearance of her stepdaughter Charmaine, whom the prosecution claimed was her first victim. The defendant in tears as she claimed Charmaine had been taken away by her natural mother. By this afternoon, Mr. Ferguson had returned to the theme of the relationship between Rosemary and Fred West. Mrs. West told the jury that she and her husband ended up leading separate lives, his building work often keeping him out until the early hours. Throughout much of her evidence, Mrs. West kept her eyes on the jury, often answering Mr. Ferguson's questions with a brief "yes, sir" or "no, sir." When he moved on to her 1972 conviction for sexual assault, she appeared more hesitant and uncertain. Initially, Mrs. West said she couldn't recall Caroline Owens, the woman involved, who'd given evidence earlier in this trial. After prompting by Mr. Ferguson, she did remember some aspects of the assault, adding, "I was frightened of Fred and tried to stop it. I was as much a victim as Caroline was." Asked about other alleged victims found in Cromwell Street, Mrs. West denied meeting all but one of them. Shown a photograph of Linda Gough, Mrs. West did remember a chance encounter. "Did you have anything to do with the death or disappearance of Linda Gough?" asked Mr. Ferguson. Answer, "No, sir." Mrs. West will continue giving evidence throughout tomorrow. Robert Hall, News at 10, Winchester Crown Court.
Mr. Major openly supported France's nuclear tests at his summit with President Chirac today, and the 2 countries are to cooperate even more closely on defence. On Europe, Mr. Chirac said Britain, with its traditions and history, couldn't be left on the sidelines. But he was dismissive of conservative Euroscepticism, calling it a fad. Our diplomatic correspondent Penny Marshall reports.
It has been a very long time since a French president was this welcome in Britain, strolling alongside the British Prime Minister in his garden at Chequers. John and Jacques so different from Margaret and Mitterrand.
Can we have you both together, sir?
Downing Street officials have been falling over themselves to stress the good personal chemistry underpinning the newly invigorated relations. Even Norma and Bernadette seemed at ease. This morning, the leaders inaugurated the new Franco-Britain Air Group at RAF Strike Command in Buckinghamshire. Defence dominated the summit. This air group will help coordinate the use of French and British air power in peacekeeping operations.
Good morning. Good morning, Good morning.
As the 2 leaders switched venues to an end-of-summit conference in London, John Major went further than expected in his support for French nuclear testing. Previously, Britain has only failed to condemn the tests. Today, John Major backed them.
It would have been extremely difficult for the head of any country not to have accepted that scientific advice and tested, as advised, his own nuclear deterrent. Upon that basis, I have offered the President my support for the action that he has taken.
While Greenpeace and CND activists demonstrated outside the Foreign Office, inside the leaders promised unprecedented nuclear cooperation, declaring what they called their joint vital interests were identical. But not quite. Over Europe, President Chirac recommitted himself to joining a single currency by 1999, dismissing anti-federalism just yards from one of Britain's Eurosceptics.
I must say, I don't know what Euroscepticism is. It's a fad. And in every country of the European Union, not only in the United Kingdom, there is such a phenomenon.
France needs Britain to counterbalance the growing economic and political power of Germany. John Major needs Jacques Chirac, a friend at the heart of Europe, as he balances domestic politics with the European agenda. Never before in defence terms have the two countries pledged such strong mutual support. A new principle of joint vital interest has today been invoked, and the logical consequences of that are considerably more military cooperation, both in terms of policy making and on the ground. Penny Marshall, News at 10, Whitehall.
The Labour leader Tony Blair got an abject apology from Shadow Transport Secretary Claire Short today for remarks she'd made about legalising cannabis. She said she should have realised that what she said would be used against her and against the party. Here's our political correspondent Jackie Ashley.
Claire Short emerged from her 30-minute dressing down with Tony Blair, apologising for her remarks on cannabis and promising to stick by the party line in future. In a written statement, she said, "I'm sorry that a few remarks on drugs at the end of an interview on transport issues have provided a distraction from the real political issue of the moment. I am aware of the need for collective responsibility and am happy to abide by it in future." Earlier, the party's chief whip made Labour's policy quite clear.
The Labour Party's position on cannabis is clear. We're not in favour of legalising cannabis. That's the collective view of the Shadow Cabinet. It's the view of the party, and about that there is no debate.
The Tory MP Alan Duncan, aide to Tory chairman Brian Mawhinney, urged in his recent book a look at the global legalisation of all drugs to bankrupt the drug barons. That, said Dr Mawhinney, was completely different to Claire Short's remarks.
The real distinction is between a book that was written a year or so ago by a backbencher and statements made by someone who would like to persuade you and me that they should be governing this country in just a few months' time. That's the real distinction, and I believe that the British people will be shocked at what Claire Short has said and shocked at the way Tony Blair has responded.
Dr Mawhinney said Claire Short should have been sacked for suggesting cannabis could be legalised. Others fully support the idea.
It will be a better way of organising it if it's properly regulated within the law. It will give credibility to the law. We can make sure that it's not being sold to younger people or promoted to younger people. We can have a proper system of regulation, of quality control, of consumer protection.
People say that let's take the dealers out of cannabis and therefore criminality would fall. Criminality wouldn't. The dealers would push other drugs. And the drugs that they now sort of sell, they would sell other ones and they would sell different ones.
A survey by ITN last year found a third of all MPs favoured decriminalising cannabis. But those few prepared to speak publicly about it say discipline in both the major parties is now so tight that all sensible debate is being stifled. Jackie Ashley, News at 10, Westminster.
An RAF pilot and his navigator were both dramatically rescued tonight after their tornado hit another in mid-air and came down in the North Sea. They were taken to hospital, though both are understood to be well. The tornadoes on a NATO exercise touched in mid-air about 60 miles northeast of Berwick-on-Tweed. The other managed to land safely at RAF Lucas. A spokesman at the Northern Rescue Coordinating Centre explains what happened.
Well, we understand the aircraft collided just before 8 o'clock tonight, and we had a helicopter from RAF Bulmer on scene within about half an hour. They found a first crew member about 15 minutes later, and about 20 minutes after that picked up the second crew member. And shortly before 10 o'clock, both were delivered to Ninewells Hospital for a full medical check.
The Norwegian tanker Borger was pulled off the rocks at the entrance to Milford Haven today without a drop of its 112,000 tons of crude oil being spilled. Luckily, it grounded in calm weather, But the Borger was also a modern ship with a double hull. Only its outer skin was punctured. ITN's James Bays reports.
For the emergency services, it could have been a worst-case scenario. A tanker containing more than 110,000 tonnes of crude oil holed on the rocks of the rugged Pembrokeshire coastline, part of a national park. An important island nature reserve is just a couple of miles away. At high tide this morning, salvage tugs moved into position in an effort to rescue the Borger, which had been stranded for more than 24 hours. Pollution control boats equipped with booms and sprays ringed the area in case it all went wrong. The tugs kept a slow strain on the ropes as the tide rose, and gently the Norwegian vessel pulled free from danger. The Borger, built in 1992, has a double-skinned hull for extra protection. The cargo is contained within the inner hull, which is separated from the outer by a cavity of at least 2 meters. So when the Borger was pierced, none of the oil on board escaped. The tanker's Norwegian captain has said the accident would never have happened if his vessel had originally been escorted into port by a tug.
We'll have to carry out an investigation to discuss with the master and the pilot concerned to try and ascertain the facts. Once we know the facts, we'll be able to evaluate what we need to do for the future.
Marine accident investigators begin work in the next few days, examining the tanker, which is tonight back in dock. James Bays, News at 10, Milford Haven.
Coming up next on News at 10 tonight, a French Revolution. Are the people of Quebec voting for independence? Right off target, is this the miss that dents Arsenal's title hopes? And against all the odds, a joyful reunion for one family who survived the tragedy of Rwanda.
Welcome to all you news-hungry, finger on the economic pulse, see you after the break types, who'll appreciate inflation-proofing their investments while not paying any tax. So are we ready for this mass onslaught?